It was an invitation from the district's music coordinator, inviting her to play at an upcoming city event, a community concert for charity. Her eyes widened. She hadn't expected this, but what mattered even more than the invitation was how she felt inside. She didn't need this recognition to feel complete, because the night before, she had already achieved something far greater. She had faced humiliation, doubt, and teasing, and turned it all into a beautiful, unforgettable moment of triumph. Her music had spoken louder than all the laughter and rumors combined. When she got home that evening, her mother was waiting. There was no big speech, no long talk. Her mother simply hugged her tightly, a hug that said everything. Then, as they sat down to dinner, her mother placed something on the table beside her plate, an old photograph of her grandmother sitting at that very piano, smiling as she played. The girl smiled too. It was almost as if her grandmother had been there last night, watching from somewhere unseen, proud of her granddaughter's courage. That night, when she sat down at her piano again, she didn't practice for school or for a concert or for the approval of anyone else. She played for herself, and as the soft notes filled their small living room, she felt completely at peace. At school, she was no longer the quiet girl in the crowd. She was no longer someone to laugh at. She was something much more powerful now, a reminder to everyone that you should never underestimate quiet strength. That sometimes the most overlooked person is the one carrying the greatest talent and heart. Her classmates had learned that lesson. So had she. Even though her performance at the talent show was over, something new had begun. It wasn't just that people at school finally noticed her now. It wasn't just that the laughter had stopped or that students were treating her differently. It was deeper than that. The girl herself had changed. For the first time in her life, she felt free from doubt, free from fear, free from wondering if she was good enough. Now she knew, not because people clapped for her, but because she had faced the crowd, faced their judgment, stayed true to who she was. In the weeks that followed, she kept walking the same school hallways. But this time, when students smiled at her, she smiled back, not shyly, but kindly. When classmates spoke to her, she spoke back, still soft, but with confidence. She hadn't suddenly become loud or popular. She didn't change how she dressed or how she acted. She was still her, quiet, thoughtful, humble. But now, she stood a little taller at home. Something else was changing too. The letter the principal gave her, the invitation to perform at a city charity concert, sat on her nightstand for a few days. She kept looking at it, unsure if she should accept. Then one evening, her mother sat down beside her and said, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. But if this makes you happy, go for it." The girl smiled. She knew the answer. She said yes. Her performance at the city concert became another beautiful moment, not as a competition. It's not to silence doubters, but simply to share her love of music with a new audience. That night, after the concert, something unexpected happened. A parent approached her with their child, a shy little girl who looked just like her a few years earlier. Quiet.
Ow.
Nervous, and hiding behind her mother's arm. She watched your performance, the mother said. She's been afraid to try piano because she's so shy. But now, she wants to learn because of you. In that instant, the girl realized something profound. Her story was no longer just about proving herself. It was about inspiring others. Her journey wasn't ending, it was just beginning in the months that followed. She helped tutor a few students quietly at school, sharing tips, offering encouragement, showing them that you didn't have to be the loudest to have a voice that mattered. And as the years passed, she stayed close to music. Not chasing fame. Not seeking applause, but playing simply because it was part of her, because music had helped her discover her true self when no one else could see her. The girl who was once humiliated. The girl they once laughed at. The girl who walked through halls like a shadow had become something more. She'd become a reminder to everyone around her that greatness doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sits quietly, it practices patiently. And then, one day, rises and shines so brightly that no one can look away. Her music changed everything. But more importantly, it had changed her. And from that day forward, she carried that quiet strength wherever she went, a strength no one could ever take away. The quiet girl in the crowd in a small-town high school where everyone knew everyone's name, there was one girl who rarely got noticed. She walked the halls with her head down, carrying an old backpack that looked a little too worn, wearing clothes that were simple and plain. She was polite, quiet, and almost invisible. She didn't laugh loudly in the hallways like the popular kids. She didn't raise her hand in class to show off answers. She never joined any teams or clubs. Instead, she sat quietly at the edge of things, a shadow in a crowd that hardly saw her. Some students made jokes behind her back. "She's so awkward," they whispered. Others simply ignored her. No one really asked where she was from, what her life was like, or what she cared about. To them, she was just the quiet girl in the crowd. But there was something about her that no one knew, a secret she kept hidden, deep inside. When the school announced the upcoming talent show, excitement filled the air. Groups of students huddled together, planning dance routines, magic tricks, and comedy skits. Posters went up in every hallway. Cafeteria buzzed with talk about who would perform and who would win. That's when something happened that made the whole school pause. The quiet girl signed up for the show. Her name appeared on the list outside the principal's office, right there, between names everyone knew. It was written in small, neat handwriting. At first, some students thought it was a mistake. "She's signing up," someone asked, half laughing. "What's she gonna do? Just stand there and stare at us?" The rumors began right away. "I bet she can't even sing. Maybe she's going to read a boring poem. She's just doing it for attention." The jokes spread fast, and before long, almost everyone had something to say about her. She became the topic of lunchtime gossip. Even students who usually ignored her now took notice, but not with kindness, with curiosity and doubt. Teachers whispered too, though more gently. "That girl, she's so quiet. I didn't even know she wanted to perform." But through all this talk, the quiet girl stayed the same. She walked the same way through the halls, head down, quiet. She didn't react to the whispers. She didn't explain why she signed up inside, though. She felt the weight of their doubt. Every time she heard someone laugh as she passed, she felt a little sting. Every time someone made a joke at her expense, she felt it in her chest. But she didn't let it stop her at home. Away from the noise of school, her life was very different. In the corner of the small living room sat an old upright piano. It wasn't fancy, some keys stuck, and its wood was scratched. But to her, it was beautiful. She had taught herself how to play late at night when her mother was working long shifts. With no teacher and no formal lessons, she watched videos online and practiced until her fingers hurt. Music became her world, a place where no one laughed at her, where no one doubted her. Every evening, she sat quietly at that piano, letting the keys tell stories she could never say out loud. It was this quiet, hidden world that gave her the courage to sign up for the talent show. Not because she wanted applause, not because she wanted to prove anything to her classmates, but because music was the one place where she felt strong, free, and alive. Still, the day of the show grew closer. The whispers at school got louder. People pointed at her in the halls. Some laughed right in front of her. Others asked mockingly, "Are you ready for your big moment?" She simply nodded and smiled softly, holding her secret close. No one knew what was coming. They saw a quiet girl who blended into the background, someone easy to overlook and easy to mock. But what they didn't see was the hours she spent practicing when everyone else was asleep, the love she had for music, the confidence she felt when her fingers touched the piano keys, and as the talent show approached. The atmosphere at school felt like a game to many students. They couldn't wait to see what they expected would be an awkward, embarrassing performance. They thought she was a joke, but they were wrong. The girl who moved quietly through the crowd was about to surprise them all, the day after her name appeared. On the talent show list, the entire school seemed to notice her, but not in a kind way. Before, she had moved quietly through the halls, almost invisible. Now, wherever she walked, she felt their stares. Some were curious, some were mocking. Almost everyone was whispering behind her back. "She's actually going to perform," a boy muttered as she passed by. "Bet she frees on stage." Another girl giggled. Some students laughed loudly on purpose when they saw her. Just a reminder that they didn't believe in her. Even in class, she felt it. The glances, the smirks, the quiet jokes shared between classmates while the teacher wasn't looking. And yet she said nothing. She kept walking, kept sitting at her desk, kept reading her books, never explaining herself to anyone. It had been easy for her to back out, to erase her name from that list, to avoid the embarrassment everyone seemed to expect. But inside, she was stronger than they realized. At home, in her quiet living room, things felt different. As soon as she sat down at her old piano, the noise of school disappeared. The teasing didn't matter. The rumors didn't matter in that moment. It was just her and the music. Late at night, she would place her fingers on the worn keys, practicing over and over until her hands ached. She played pieces far more difficult than anyone at her school could imagine. She had taught herself everything from reading sheet music to mastering complex melodies. Her mother would come home late from work, tired but smiling softly when she heard the piano. Even though her mother didn't say much, she supported her quietly, leaving little notes of encouragement on her bedroom door or bringing home sheet music she found at thrift shops. It was this quiet love, this quiet work that gave her strength. But at school, things felt different. She heard them laugh behind her back. Why even bother? Duh. She's not going to make it past the first few notes. She's just doing this for attention. She's going to mess up and cry. Some students even planned to record her performance so they could share it online and laugh about it later. And yet she stayed calm. Every morning, she walked into school with her head held a little higher, though still soft-spoken. She didn't argue or try to defend herself. She didn't brag or explain. She simply waited. Because deep down, she knew what no one else did. She was ready. She knew what would happen the moment her fingers touched those piano keys. She knew the music she would play would be different than anyone expected. And while the crowd prepared for what they thought would be a disaster, she prepared for something else entirely. Behind every whisper, every laugh, every cruel joke, she held a quiet secret. They thought she was a joke. But soon, very soon, they would see the truth. While her classmates gossiped and joked about her at school, they had no idea what her life looked like when she walked through the front door of her small apartment each afternoon. Her home was nothing fancy. The walls were plain, the furniture old, but it was warm and full of quiet love. In one corner of the living room sat her most treasured possession, an old upright piano. It wasn't perfect. Its keys were chipped. The wood was scratched. Sound sometimes wavered, a little out of tune. But to her it was beautiful, and it held memories. This piano had once belonged to her grandmother, a woman she barely remembered but admired deeply. Her grandmother had been a gifted pianist in her youth, playing in small concerts and teaching students in their neighborhood. After her grandmother passed away, piano became part of the background in their apartment, unused, gathering dust, until one day, curiosity led the girl to touch the keys. That simple moment had changed her life. At first, she had just pressed the keys randomly, fascinated by the sound. But slowly, something inside her shifted. She began teaching herself, one note at a time, watching free videos online and copying what she saw, without lessons, without encouragement from anyone at school, without expensive books or fancy tools. Every night after finishing her homework, she would sit at that piano, headphones on, fingers learning to dance. She practiced until her hands felt tired, correcting herself again and again. The piano became her escape. At school, she felt small, ignored, laughed at. But at home, seated at that piano, she felt strong, free, and in control. Her mother would sometimes watch quietly from the kitchen. She never interrupted, but her soft smile said everything. Even after long shifts at work when she was too tired to speak much, she would pass by her daughter and gently squeeze her shoulder, a small reminder that she was proud, even if she didn't always say it aloud. The girl had kept this world a secret. No one at school knew she could play at all. No one knew how many hours she spent mastering beautiful, complex pieces. To them, she was just the quiet girl in the crowd, the awkward one, the invisible one. But here in this small living room, she was something else entirely. Here her fingers flew across the keys with skill and grace. Here she could lose herself in the music for hours. Here she didn't feel judged or misunderstood. When she signed up for the talent show, it wasn't on a whim. It wasn't a desperate attempt for attention. It was a quiet decision, a promise to herself. She wanted to share what she had kept. Hidden for so long, not for applause, not to win a prize, but because her music mattered to her. Because music made her feel alive in a way nothing else did. And because deep down, she knew that when she finally sat at that piano on stage, she would show them all, not out of anger, not out of revenge. She would show them what it meant to hold on to something quietly, patiently, to love something deeply, even when no one believed in you. Her classmates thought she would embarrass herself, but in her small living room, late at night, her fingers moved confidently across the keys, telling a story they didn't know yet, a story that was waiting to unfold. The day of the talent show was almost here, and she was ready. The day of the talent show finally arrived. The atmosphere at school was electric. Students rushed through the hallways, joking, laughing, and making guesses about who would win. The cafeteria was full of chatter about funny acts, impressive dance routines, in which students would shine on stage. But whenever the quiet girl's name came up, the tone was different. She's really going through with it, one boy said. Laughing with his friends, I bet she's going to freeze the moment she sits down, a girl added, shaking her head. A few students even planned to record her performance on their phones, not to celebrate her, but to capture what they assumed would be a disaster. All day she heard the whispers as she walked between classes, but her face remained calm. She didn't speak much, just nodded politely when spoken to, and kept walking. Inside, her heart was beating faster than usual, but it wasn't because of fear. It was because she was ready, after school. The auditorium filled with students, teachers, and even some parents. The stage lights shone brightly, casting long shadows. Across the polished wooden floor, rows of folding chairs were packed with people, buzzing with excitement. Backstage, performers waited their turn, some pacing nervously, some practicing lines or tuning instruments. The quiet girl sat alone on a bench, her hands folded gently in her lap, her expression peaceful but focused. When her name was finally called, a wave of giggles rippled through the audience. She's next, someone whispered loudly. This will be fun to watch. Another student chuckled, but she didn't look at them. She stepped slowly onto the stage, her shoes making soft taps on the wooden floor. The grand piano sat waiting for her under a warm spotlight, gleaming and silent. The crowd expected hesitation, a stumble, a nervous glance, maybe even tears. Instead, she moved calmly, pulling out the piano bench and sitting down with quiet grace. She took a moment to settle herself. Her hands rested gently on her lap. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing in deeply. In that pause, the audience filled the silence with whispers and light laughter. But then, she lifted her hands and placed her fingers on the keys at that. The very moment, something shifted. Her fingers hovered for just a second, and then she played the first note, soft, rich, and perfectly clear. The sound cut through the noise in the auditorium like a gentle wave. The whispers stopped almost instantly. Heads turned. Students who had been smirking suddenly leaned forward, curious. Her face stayed calm. Focused, not tense or nervous, but full of quiet strength. With every note that followed, the mood in the room transformed. She played with precision, skill, and feeling. The music flowed beautifully, telling a story even without words. Her fingers moved effortlessly, confidently, across the keys. This was not what anyone had expected. Even teachers, who had doubted her, looked at each other with wide eyes. A parent sitting in the back whispered, "She's incredible. No one knows she could play like this." The same classmates who laughed now sat frozen, their eyes locked on the stage. As she played, she didn't think about them. She didn't think about their jokes, the whispers, or the rumors. She thought about her mother's tired smile at home. She thought about the nights she stayed up practicing when no one believed in her. She thought about her grandmother's old piano and all the love she had poured into this moment. This was her story to tell, not with words, but with music. And she was telling it beautifully. By the time she reached the final section of the piece, a difficult, fast, and emotional passage, the audience was completely silent. No one laughed now. They watched, stunned, as the girl they had once called a joke played like a genius. And even though she knew they were finally seeing her, she didn't need their approval. She was playing for herself, and she was just getting started. The first note she played that night did something no one expected. It changed the entire mood in the room instantly. Just seconds earlier, the audience had been restless, noisy, filled with laughter and careless jokes at her expense. Students whispered in the back rows, some already holding up their phones to record what they thought would be a funny failure. But when that first sound filled the auditorium, pure, soft, and beautiful, a hush fell over everyone. That one note carried a quiet confidence. It wasn't loud or showy. It wasn't rushed. It was perfect. Her fingers followed with the next note, smooth and steady. Each key she pressed seemed to pull the entire audience closer, their eyes fixed on her, their laughter gone. Even the teachers, who sat near the back and had exchanged doubtful looks when she first walked on stage, now leaned forward, drawn in by her skill. But on that stage, the girl didn't think about them at all as she played. The lights felt softer, the stage felt warmer, and the crowd felt distant. It was almost as if she was sitting in her small living room at home again, where she had practiced every night, where her fingers learned every chord, every melody, every pause. Her music didn't just sound good, it felt good. There was something raw and real about how she played. It was like she was telling her whole story through the keys. Without saying a single word, she didn't rush through the notes or try to impress anyone with speed. Instead, she let the music breathe. She let each note have its moment. Her hands moved with grace, but also purpose. As if this piece was part of her, and it was. This was the same song she had practiced late at night. Long after everyone else in her apartment building had gone to sleep, this was the song she had learned by watching old videos, studying every movement carefully until she could play it from memory, until it felt like hers, that first note. And every note after was a reminder of all the time she had spent alone, working quietly while others laughed and doubted her. But now, same people who laughed were silent. Some students who had teased her before now sat frozen, eyes wide, listening carefully. Even the students who still held their phones up forgot to hit record, too caught up in what they were witnessing. The beauty of her music didn't just surprise them. It moved them. A soft warmth spread across the room as her playing grew deeper, more emotional. The piece itself was complex, filled with tricky fingerwork and subtle changes in tempo. But she played it all flawlessly, not with arrogance, but with heart. And slowly, something amazing happened. The audience didn't just stop laughing. They started feeling something they hadn't expected to. Respect, admiration, wonder, and as her fingers danced over the keys, the quiet girl they had always ignored suddenly felt larger than life. In that moment, she wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't awkward or shy. She wasn't the girl who sat alone at lunch. She wasn't the joke they thought she would be. She was a musician, a true artist, someone who could capture an entire room with nothing but her music and the honesty in her heart. And even though she never once looked up from the piano, she could feel that change. She could feel the silence turning into respect. Her first note had done something no one in that room expected. It had told them exactly who she was, and she was just getting started. As her hands glided across the piano keys, something remarkable began to happen, not just on stage, but in the hearts of everyone watching. The same students who had spent weeks laughing at her, the same classmates who whispered behind her back, even the teachers who barely remembered her name. All of them sat completely still. They couldn't look away. Her music had pulled them in note by note, breath by breath, and now they weren't just listening. they were feeling. Some students who had laughed the loudest were now leaning forward, eyes wide and jaws slightly open. Their smirks were gone. Their phones, which had been held up to record and mock her, slowly lowered into their laps as they forgot about their jokes. Even teachers who thought her performance would be awkward or uncomfortable were now exchanging surprised glances, a respect quietly growing with every note she played. The auditorium had changed. Before she started, it felt noisy, restless, and distracted, filled with whispers, giggles, and doubt. Now it felt warm and quiet, as if the whole room was holding its breath. But on stage, the girl remained calm and steady. Her fingers moved smoothly, beautifully, never missing a note. Her posture was perfect, not stiff, but graceful. Every movement felt natural and full of confidence, as if she had done this 1,000 times before, and in many ways, she had. Maybe not in front of a crowd, maybe not under bright lights, but in her small apartment at night. When no one was watching, she had practiced these same notes again and again, until they became part of her. Her performance wasn't just about skill, it was about emotion. Her music told a quiet story that didn't need words. The story of being ignored. The story of being underestimated. The story of hours spent practicing alone while others laughed. The story of loving something deeply and working for it quietly. Even when no one believed in her, every person in the auditorium could feel it. Even if they didn't fully understand what they were feeling, her mother, sitting near the back, felt it too. She sat very still, a soft smile on her face, and a tear gently rolling down her cheek. She didn't need anyone to explain what this moment meant. She knew better than anyone how hard her daughter had worked for this. This wasn't just a performance, it was a quiet triumph. And as the girl continued to play, something deeper changed in the room. The students who once mocked her weren't just impressed, they were moved. Some even felt embarrassed for how they had treated her. A few whispered softly to each other, "She's amazing." Others simply stayed silent, letting the music speak. The teachers who had doubted her now saw her in a new light, not just as a shy, quiet girl, but as a young artist, full of talent and heart. In that moment, she wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't a target for jokes. She was the center of the room, not because she demanded it, but because her music had earned it. By the time she reached the final section of the song, her confidence had grown even stronger. Her hands moved faster, gracefully mastering every difficult passage. Her expression stayed calm, but there was a quiet joy in the way she played. A joy that came from knowing she had finally shown them who she really was. Her music had transformed the room. The audience who once thought she was a joke now sat in awe, and even though she hadn't said a single word, she had told them everything. The final part of her performance had arrived. It was the most difficult section of all. The piece she had chosen wasn't easy. In fact, even trained pianists would hesitate before performing it in front of a large crowd. The ending was fast, sharp, and full of complex fingerwork that demanded focus, speed, and perfect timing. But as the quiet girl approached this part of the song, her confidence didn't waver. Her fingers danced across the keys. With grace and energy, the notes tumbled out beautifully, fast but controlled, powerful but emotional. The audience watched, completely mesmerized. No one in the room spoke. No one whispered. No one even moved. Students who once smirked at her now sat at the edge of their seats, eyes wide, fully caught up in the moment. Their laughter from earlier seemed like a distant memory. Even the teachers sat in stunned silence. Some leaning forward, fully focused on her hands as they moved effortlessly, and still, she never looked up. Her eyes stayed on the keys. Her expression stayed calm, but inside, she could feel it. This was her moment. She could feel the shift in the room. The shift from doubt to respect. The shift from laughter to admiration. The shift from invisibility to being truly. Seen daughter mother sat quietly in the back row, hands clasped together, tears of pride shining in her eyes. She didn't need to say a word, her heart was full. For the girl on stage, this wasn't just about playing a difficult song. This was about every night she stayed up practicing while others slept. Every time she heard classmates whispering about her. Every time she felt small and ignored. This was her answer to all of it. Not through anger, not through words. Through music, her final notes came quickly now, rising and falling with perfect emotion, pulling the entire audience along with her. And then, the last note. It rang out, soft but strong, clear and beautiful, and as it faded into silence, she lifted her hands gently from the keys. For a moment, there was absolute stillness. Not a single clap, not a single whisper, just complete silence, as if no one could quite believe what they had just witnessed. And then, suddenly, the entire room erupted. Applause thundered from every corner of the auditorium. Students stood up, clapping and cheering loudly. Even the teachers rose from their seats, joining in the standing ovation. The same classmates who had doubted her now clapped the loudest. Some looked at each other, shaking their heads in disbelief, smiles on their faces. No trace of mockery left. The girl stayed seated at the piano for a moment, breathing deeply. She didn't smile widely or bow dramatically. Instead, she simply nodded once, calmly, and then stood up from the bench as she walked off the stage. The applause continued, loud and genuine. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't walking. With her head down, she wasn't invisible anymore. She had shown them all, not by speaking, not by arguing, but by letting her music speak for her. And her music had said everything. The day after her performance, everything felt different. So long, she had walked through the halls unnoticed, almost invisible. But now, as she entered the school building, students who once ignored her turned their heads to look at her. Some smiled politely. Others simply nodded in respect. Few even stopped to speak. "Hey," one boy said softly, "you were amazing." "Last night," another girl added, "I didn't know you could play like that, honestly. You're incredible." Even the teachers seemed different. One teacher who had never said much to her before stopped her outside the classroom. "You moved that entire audience," the teacher said gently. "Your music had heart. You should be very proud." For the first time, her walk through the hallways felt light. No more whispers, no more giggles behind her back, just quiet respect. But what touched her most came later that day, in the afternoon. The principal called her to his office, but not because she was in trouble. When she arrived, she was surprised to see him smiling warmly. "I've had a few calls this morning," he said. "I'm parents who were at the talent show last night couldn't stop talking about your performance." Then he handed her a letter.